How do we build our dreams when we don't know what we want? Learn how Flaunt solves this problem in 5 bold and glittery steps with radio host Laura Cheadle. Using a combination of best girlfriend discussions and therapy-based exercises, listeners are taught how to build their dreams and live their sparkle. Flaunt. Find your fetish, laugh out loud, accept unconditionally, navigate the negative, and trust in your truth.
Hello, welcome to Flaunt, Build Your Dreams and Live Your Sparkle. I am Laura Cheadle, and we have got an amazing show today on courage. Now, I've got a special guest. Her name is Sandra Walston, and she is known as the Courage Expert. Now, she is a global speaker and a principal of a 21-year-old human potential consulting firm based in Denver, Colorado. Along with being a courage coach, she has over 20 years of original research in integrating courage behaviors, courageous leadership, women's courage, and non-gender integral levels of courage consciousness. She focuses on the traps and tricks of the human condition, such as denial, oh boy, that's a big one, uncertainty, and self-doubt. And at appropriate times, she applies the Enneagram or the Myers-Briggs indicator. So with that, I just want to jump right in and welcome Sandra to the show. Welcome.
Thank you, Laura. That was such a passionate introduction and greatly appreciated.
Oh, good. I just think courage is such an underlooked philosophy, an underlooked idea. I feel like people think sometimes courage is something big and outrageous that only a few people do. And I love that you bring courage to the masses, that you share with people what it is, different ways to exhibit courage. I love that. So I would like you to just talk a little bit more about your work and how you got involved in courage in the first place.
Well, I think what's important, you kind of hit on something that's interesting. Not too many people allude to what you just said, which is how courage actually travels under the radar. And being misunderstood. And so I think the first thing, Laura, is to establish what I'm talking about with courage, because the issues that we have to overcome, culturally speaking, as to what our people think courage is not what my work is. So, but I invite people to embrace the etymology of the word courage, which is medieval Old French courage, meaning heart and spirit. So how do I really walk in my true self and my heart and spirit? So it's easier for me to go off on a tangent about what people in our culture and how we've been socialized, thinking that courage is really about creating a duality, courage and fear. So I can't have courage unless, without fear. I don't research for 24 years. I don't do any research on creating that duality. Our culture supports and sells fear beautifully. So I do not. Also, courage, just for your listeners, is generally confused with the sensational, the amazing, the tragic, the scandalous, or glamorizing the superficial, which would totally wipe out the defining moments in my life and most average person's life. So we need to look at the bedrock of what courage really means.
I love that. And yes, you're right. It would wipe out all of the everyday courageous behaviors. And yeah, the connection of the heart. Courage can be a very small act. And also I was thinking courage is very different for me than it may be for you, than it may be for different listeners. For some people, it may be larger, glorious, glamorous steps, but for most of us, it's not.
No, and you're so right. And then we end up discounting, which I think is some of your work, insightful work portrays, because it's how we end up discounting ourselves, the chatter that goes on in our head that eliminates us from walking in our true self. And so therefore we end up creating what I call false truths about ourselves, as compared to inviting in our true self. And then courage is also famous people or whatever. And the 3 books that I've written, I interview what I call the everyday person. They aren't the top presidents of a company or the whatever. They are everyday people who've overcome. Also, the other thing I should insert in that is that, and I'm an 11th hour hospice volunteer, so my heart goes to the physical, but my work is not about physical courage. There are facets of courage that my research discovered. I'm really not that smart, Laura. It's research. There's emotional courage, there's leadership courage, there's personal courage, there's physical courage. Once again, our culture tends to go to physical courage and the sensational, the amazing, the tragic, the scandalous, and glamorizing the superficial. Whew. And if you don't think that can take a long time for me to learn how to say that in one breath.
Oh, I bet. Yes, and you say your research talks about courage behaviors, courageous leadership, women's courage, and then the non-gender integral levels of courage consciousness. None of those, I don't think, are any of those things that you've talked about. Physical, glamorous, tragic. Courage behaviors, talk some more about that. We'll start with that and what those look like for the majority of your clients, as well as probably for the majority of my listeners here today.
Well, that was very astute of you to recognize that what I said was not based upon my research. Yeah, exactly. Most people wouldn't be that astute. Well, for example, when I talk about integral levels of courage consciousness, an example would be, yes, I want people to come from their heart and spirit. I want them to be able to recognize, gosh, why in that interview with Laura did I swallow my voice on blah, blah, blah? Why didn't I have the courage to be vulnerable in that staff meeting? So when you begin to look at, the chatter that, once again, the false truth about why I shouldn't, because maybe somebody will think I'm stupid or, all of the stuff that we as human beings do, a higher integral level of courage consciousness would recognize that chatter and be able to research what is the false truth that keeps me stuck in accepting that chatter. So courage is actually very quiet and stands in the dignity of it, and a higher integral level of courage consciousness would be what I call where courage meets grace.
Say more about that. Courage and grace, those are 2 of my favorite words.
Oh, well, if we had a list, and anybody can pull those up in any book, I keep a list when I do presentations of virtues, because to be honest, Laura, most people can't name more than 2 virtues. This is the honest truth. You're giving me a look. I mean, throughout all of my years, whether it's 20 people, I'm doing a training program, or 800 people, they say the same thing. So I'll say, so just shout out shout out a couple of virtues. They all say the same thing. The same thing is honesty and integrity. Cool. Yes. All right. And yeah.
And they get stuck.
Dead silence and stuck. So I'll always have a list of virtues to say that they can apply to. Once in a while, somebody may say compassion, but grace is really, when we talk about our courage, it's not about being a steamroller. It's not about shouting or cussing or, being bigger or better or whatever. It's really about what kind of linguistic skills do I have that can touch that person's cellular structure that actually leaves them feeling encouraged.
Oh, I like that. I really like that. And also, I just want to honor you for saying it's not about yelling and being, steamrolling over somebody else, because that's aggression, and courage and aggression are not the same. And I love how you bring it back and turn it over to the people that we are interacting with. Our own courage encourages them. I love that. That's beautiful.
And just to look at how many times in the day you can touch someone with a word of encouragement, and I say that like EN hyphen rather than encouragement, because you never know in somebody's life how you're touching their life, the magic that's in their life. So I tell people my job is to sprinkle fairy goddess dust all day. And sometimes when I give a keynote, I'll take my magic wand just to make sure I've got backup on my or my courage pills. I carry a bottle of courage pills and I shake them and say, see, I've got courage pills, but it's only good for one situation. But, we're so caught up in being busy. I'm so busy that we forget that the cellular structure of the human being really is the aliveness is in the heart. And research shows that, not my research, but other scientists, researchers. So the grace really comes in the tone and in just saying those simple words. And I will say to you that only 11% of women perceive themselves as courageous, which is what yielded my first book by Random House. And I think the underbelly of why we're still at 78 cents per dollar, somebody told me we're at 80 cents. Oh, okay, whoopee. All right, yay!
Not a big difference.
When I moved here 25 years ago, we were at 73. Yeah. And that the issue, the underpinning of that is woman's inhumanity to woman.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. Yes. You are speaking my language on that one. And isn't it true that courage and that grace and that supporting of each other, when we are empowering another woman, we are lifting them up. And when we lift them up, we also lift ourselves up higher. And how courageous of us to lift somebody else up, knowing full well that we could sink into fear and tear them down to make ourselves look better. But by doing that, we bring down all of womanhood, all of humanity, but mostly we tearing down our sisters decreases our status as well. And that's a big one.
Yes, and I say you said it beautifully, and I'll just tag on to that I say that there is nothing, and I mean nothing, like the collective feminine energy of courage. If we would all come together, and I write and research a lot about this in my first book, if we would come together and actually extract from our DNA that energy that we have hovered for eons. I mean, when it was taken from the matriarch and shifted to the patriarch, we would be immediately, that's me clapping my hands, at full parity in our price. And there would be a whole different, actually, universe out there if that happened. And never once, Laura, has a woman ever said, "You don't know what you're talking about, Sandra. You are nuts." Now, both those things may be true, but it's not true on that. And no woman, every woman shakes her head or says yes.
Mm-hmm. No, that you're absolutely correct on that. And also what I love about the courage and the grace and what you've just said with that and this whole divine feminine and us elevating, it's such a quietly powerful movement that it can't be denied. Because when we are coming together in that solidarity, we create that beautiful mesh, that beautiful net that nobody can penetrate with fear or negativity or judgment. We only break that net ourselves when we fail to act in courage or grace or support. And it's all about us. And so much of our culture is focused on the other person, what they're doing to us, what they're causing in us. If somebody would only do this to me, if somebody would stop doing that to me. But it's all internal. It's what we do. And that's the only thing we can control. And that's where our power lies.
Yes. Beautiful. Yeah, so the element of courage about, first taking responsibility to walk my own walk. I write about Dorothy also a little bit in my first book, we all fall into a pothole on the yellow brick road.
Of course.
How much of a reservoir of courage do you have in which to draw? And you might say, hey, Laura, I need to update my resume. I need to get a coach. I need to start doing more networking. That's cool, so maybe it takes you a little longer. But the difference of having that courage story as compared to saying, well, it took me 5 years to leave that horrible company, rat, is that, well, but now I left and